2C series is here, and you can use different tests to tell which one. So like, yeah, here 2CE, 2CT2, T4, and T7 are all really similar with your one test, but you can easily differentiate them using another test. So if you buy your whole kit, base value is like $65, and you're gonna get 50 to 100 tests out of each bottle. It's just one little drop. So it is a good investment, and you can see all the different things that you're able to test for.
I don't see DMT on
I don't think DMT is on there.
So there's another thing about testing kits is that, you know, they're really great, but sometimes there are errors and sometimes people don't know quite how to use them. It's not like in a scientific literature, they would never use these tests to like determine what a drug is. Like there's much higher quality like testing that can happen, and it actually happens at certain festivals in Europe. So like this is like a really evolved thing where they bring like really like intense equipment and they can really tell you what's in it. So obviously this is where we would want to go with it. Like this is what's available now and it's super useful, but it has limitations. So that's another thing that we're advocating for. And like to find out information, you can actually go online. I mean, this was, I guess, easier when it was mostly pill form and things were branded, but you could go online and look things up, and it had been tested with actual like scientific level equipment. So you have to also have an awareness that these tests, you know, they will definitely, they're better than nothing and they're good in many circumstances, but there are limitations.
That is something that still happens on the DanceSafe site. There's a link to it, pillreports.com. You can check out, you know, North America, wherever you're trying to go, and people have generated reports here. Yeah, as recent as March 15th, March 1st, where people, maybe they tested them, maybe they didn't, but it's user generated, so it's your peers in the community talking about this.
So I have a question, Stephanie. You said earlier you wanted to look at more information about the criminal justice impact of the presence of these festivals, and you wanted to look at, you know, how many cops are present and how many arrests are being made. Do you, like, what are the goals of that really? Are you trying to have less police officers present at these? Maybe just trying to ease the tension?
I mean, if we're going towards a world in which people are not, you know, punished for what they put in their bodies, absent harm to others, then, you know, yes, ultimately, like, police are there to keep you safe, and like, I don't feel very safe being arrested just for like using a drug.
Right.
I feel safe when somebody stops a fight, or, you know, that sort of thing. And like, you know, so it's not about getting rid of police, but it's about having them focus on the things that, you know, that we want them to focus on. So, you know, one of the reasons is just an awareness level, because I don't think even people in the community talk very much about what the cops are doing there and how, you know, it's just kind of accepted, like
Right.
if you're going to a festival or an event. And part of being able to change that is to change people's perception and be like, hey, actually this is not okay. Like, it's not okay that like they arrested 50 people at this event. And it's not okay that they sent undercovers in, and you know, that sort of thing.
A quick comment, I am assuming that you're both very happy that the drug czar supports what you're doing.
What are you talking about?
The drug czar. He said in a speech a couple months ago that we understand that this drug problem is fundamentally a healthcare and an educational problem,
Oh, right.
right?
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to mention is, and I've been banging around this movement for a long time, 25 years
Oh,
now,
yeah.
okay? The greatest harm, as you've articulated numerous times, that is being done by this drug policy is in fact the arrested people. That's a greater harm than overdoses, than anything else. And yet we talk about harm reduction and we hide from legalization. And that should be the first comment from a harm reductionist. First, get this into a regulated, controlled marketplace where we have control over it. And then we can start reducing the harm like we're doing with alcohol and like we're doing with other legal, tobacco. Perfect example of how we're dealing with it in a legal marketplace, and those are wonderful examples to use. But it's bothered me for a long time, and when I used the term L word before, I don't know if you know what I'm referring, but I went all through the 90s going to DPF, DPA conferences, and having people telling me not to use the L word.
Yeah.
Don't talk about legalization. And my problem is that I'm a retired cop, and that's the only thing I can talk about.
Yeah.
So basically, what they were telling me to do was shut up and go home,
Yeah, I mean,
and I didn't do that.
I totally hear your point, and like, you know, I work at DPA, so, and we take a very mediated sort of approach, so sometimes it's very
It was
frustrating.
very nice to hear Ethan up in Alaska using the prohibition word.
Yeah.
I was very happy to hear
I
that.
mean, it's, you know, the conversation is changing, and so it's our job in the room to kind of keep pushing it. And I actually think as a communication strategy, that's not a bad way to go. Like, if you go to your school administration and be like, well, if you want to solve this problem, we should legalize MDMA. They'll be like, what? And you'll be like, okay, but if we're not gonna do that, here's all these other things in the meantime we can do. All of a sudden, you sound really reasonable. Like, they're like, okay, we're not gonna go for this actual thing that I want, but here's all these other things that we can, now is middle ground. Like, you're not like asking for like, oh, I know it's really hard for you to like understand harm reduction and blah, blah, blah. No, you're like, actually, we want legalization. But if you're not going for that, then here's a middle ground of harm reduction. You know, I don't know if that'll actually work. I have no numbers on that, but that's just a theory in line with what you were saying.
Yeah, if we could you go back to the advocacy part of what you were saying? And,
Back to the what?
Approaching businesses and vendors and stuff, what are some successful frames you've used in that conversation? And what are, and beyond, and just talk a little bit more about the legal aspects of a business engaging in this
Cool.
conversation.
So the most success that we had have been at privately held festivals on somebody's personal land where they can control, hey, we have our own private security and we can kind of leave government law enforcement out of this. So the End of the World Festival, I think it was down in Florida, that's where we were actually able to drug test at our table and be official, say, hey, yes, you can come to us, we're not gonna bust you, this is what you got. As far as we can tell, I mean, we don't have, like you were saying before, we don't have a chromograph here that we can really figure out, but the best thing that we can do. So yeah, private festivals, private land, that's the best success that we've had. And because on the other side of it, a festival like Summer Camp Music Festival, which is held on State Fairground, there's local law enforcement all over the place. We can't have that conversation with them because they won't let us set up there. It's really a matter of finding places that are owned by somebody who's willing to work with you, because if they're adamantly opposed and it's relatively public land, unfortunately there's little that we can do in a public context to get around that.
So I guess that's more of what I was asking. To pick up directly, like you said, the TLA, for instance, just won't engage in this sort of thing because there's some legal ramifications. And I was just curious, like, if anyone has worked with a business who has been on that side of the fence and has gotten to the other side with them, and what would that conversation sound like, and where do you begin if you're, trying to get there with the TLA or another big venue or something?
Yeah, so we did have that conversation at the Blockley, and what really worked was saying, hey, look, we're not promoting drugs, but you know that you already have this issue inside your club. In the Philly area, it both helped and hurt our conversation. A year or two ago, it was like a Zed's Dead show at the Electric Factory. Like 3 people got carted out of there for overdose because they took, surprise, a bunch of methadone. Being able to talk about that, saying, hey, this is going on in your city, you know that this is going on in your club. The Blockley had a big issue with a bunch of ketamine use, people passing out there. Talking to them, explaining what we do, through the focus of not saying this is, we're pro-drug, we're anti-drug, saying we would like to educate, we would like to talk to your people. A lot of times it didn't work. The TLA, I talked face to face with the manager, And he just flat out told me that that he's not willing to address this. Keep working on them. I got frustrated, I kind of gave up on the PLA. That's me as a bad activist. But I mean, it can be frustrating, and sometimes then you got to work around them. So we're trying to get spots other places in Philly. If we can get set up at a handful of venues as like a permanent fixture, then you can go back to the TLA and say, hey, we're already doing this. Talk to your peers as a music venue owner. Talk to fellow music venue owners that we're working with, and they'll tell you that we're not a bunch of druggy hooligans. We're just trying to keep people safe.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge how you brought up like one of the biggest challenges. It's a very difficult point, and anybody who's working in this field has to face it, because promoters and business owners are essentially conservative, and it can be very hard to sway. And I think he has a good strategy. Like if you're running up against a wall with one, try and build like a support of like a lot of people, so then it's like, you know, it's almost like peer pressure. And I would also say it might not be that you're the best messenger. It could be, you know, about building a coalition that involves law enforcement or city officials. Like if you can sway those people, their influence on local businesses and promoters is gonna be like, it's gonna bring a lot of weight to what you have to say. Because, I mean, even with people who are philosophically aligned, like club owners and promoters, you know, they just prefer to be told what to do on some issues, because it's just too risky for them to step out. And so if you have a cop on your side, or if you have a city official who's like, this is a problem in our town, and like, this is us working with this group to like solve it, so you better fall in line, like, then you might have some more success.
So we're just about out of time. We're gonna take one last quick question. Back.
I feel like one of the most dangerous settings on college campuses for drug use are the off-campus parties. So, you guys mind speaking on that?
Yeah, and this is something that you can do if you're comfortable with it, just as an individual. You don't have to put any name on it. If you know that you're going to a party where people are buying, using drugs, bring your test kit with you. You don't even need to necessarily advertise it if you're not comfortable with that. Have it with you, and when you see it taking place, or you know, in a conversation, you can bring it up. Hey, I have these test kits. If you're curious about what you have now or later, get in touch with me. We'll sit down. We can go somewhere private, and we can test this. I've got test kits at my house. I bring them to friends' house who need that service. Yeah, it's just something that you can do as an individual to bring it out of you.
Yeah, I would just amplify that. I mean, because that's, you know, I said I didn't do harm reduction, and that means I didn't sit at a table, but like, I felt like it was my responsibility as somebody who went out with other people who are using drugs and that sort of thing, to be as educated as possible, and to like educate my friends and provide them with that information. So you guys are the front line of doing that. For everything you learn in this room, and like 2 friends you tell, like they're gonna pass that knowledge along, and we can't underestimate the importance of that. Like, so showing up to those off-campus parties where, you know, a little bit of knowledge will go a long way in that area. And I'll also say it's important because we want to expand Good Samaritan outside of campuses, because it's important that, you know, in the event of an overdose, wherever you are, that you can call for help to save a life. So, you know, DPA will keep working on the policies outside the campuses, and hopefully you guys will keep working on campuses, and then join us once you graduate. So I really want to thank you all in the room for being so engaged, and for being like those people on the campuses that are going to probably save a life or educate someone. So, wait.
Being here, you kind of end up being the responsible friend. You guys are the guys that are armed with the knowledge. Maybe you have test kits. You're the responsible friend. Allow people to come to you and help.
Thank you very much, Jay. Stephanie?
Yes. So we're gonna break for lunch. We'll be returning, starting our next panel. It's gonna be a great one. It's following suit. Is marijuana legalization coming to the Northeast with wonderful Peter Christ, law enforcement from Prohibition. We got several other figures. So yeah, 215 back in this room. Thank you.